It's Tuesday afternoon at 4 p.m. in Switzerland, and it's Space Café Webtalk time. Our Space Café Webtalk, 33 minutes with Dr. Darren McKnight, will begin soon. Thanks for joining us today for the talk, Space Traffic Management, Simple but Not Easy. As always, we appreciate your participation and ongoing feedback that is very valuable for us and help us to improve. I'm Torsten Kriening, your host today and publisher of SpaceWatch.Global. We are a Switzerland-based online platform for information in and about space and new space activities in a geopolitical context. I know many of you are already familiar with our website, our bi-weekly and daily newsletters, and the Space Café podcast. Our latest episode, number 23, features Professor Pascal Ehrenfreund talking about astrobiology. Check that out. That's a very cool one and gives some great insights. We also keep our fan shop open online for you to support us actively and become a space watcher. At least I can show this mug today. Our edition one has cool items for you, your friends, and the ones you love. And your support is really needed to keep our work alive for you. I told that I'm a bit nervous today. I think so. If you missed any of our previous web talks, we have an archive available on our website in the event section and on YouTube. We host our Space Café web talks live weekly, and this Space Café, as mentioned before, is already our 50th episode today. So, as you see today, I'm super excited. There are many reasons for that. One of them is that today I have a guest I admire for his great and profound work in the industry for space safety and space security. Somebody I listened first when I was in Dubai at the World Space Risk Forum many moons ago, and we stayed in contact ever since. With that, a very warm welcome to the Space Café today, Dr. Darren McKnight.
Thank you, Torsten.
So, welcome. A few words about you. I promise just a few words. Darren is currently a senior technical fellow for Leo Labs, and Darren leads the efforts to realize the value proposition of the growing global network of ground-based radars for space situational awareness, space safety, and space sustainability. He creates new data description. I can't read that. Depictions? Depictions. Okay. I will learn later what it is, so I should have Googled it before. Develops risk algorithm and leads space incident investigations. He has co-authored 5 books on topics ranging from space debris and spacecraft operation to soccer coaching and workforce productivity. Darren has authored over 100 technical papers and presented them in 16 countries. Happy to have you here with us today in our very special episode, Darren. So let's kick that off now. We are talking about space safety, space security, threats by mega constellation, and space debris for a while. Help us here. Can you please give us a short briefing about all of that?
Well, space debris, unfortunately, is the result of us just being a little bit sloppy in our space operations over the years. We have old rocket bodies, we have old payloads that don't work anymore, but unfortunately we also have, over 12,000 fragments from explosions and collisions that have occurred in space. So it's basically, think about the beltway or your roadway where there are wrecks, and instead of the debris going away from the wrecks, they keep going 60 miles an hour on the highway. That's what's going on in space right now.
Can we dive a bit deeper into these issues? So, and what are these really current threats you analyze in your daily work?
So like most things, it's not simple, right? And it's definitely not easy. But what we really are talking about is there's kind of 2 buckets of things we're worried about. One, it's this new wave of many satellites being launched at once. Now, the good news about these new satellites is they're not very big, 50 kilograms, 200 kilograms, and they're very capable. So they have of collision avoidance capability. They can maneuver. They can change their attitude. They're very smart. But there's lots of them. The bad news is for decades, we were launching big objects, leaving them in high altitudes. Sometimes they blow up, sometimes they just sit there and continue to go around and around. So about 80% of all the mass on orbit actually was deposited before the turn of the century. So we sort of living two different worlds here. The risk is the old legacy stuff that nobody's responsible for because we were just, being great, folks conquering space. But now we're being more responsible. We're going to pay for our previous inconvenience of being a little bit more responsible with our hardware.
I mean, talking about the various levels or sizes of debris, I think I can refer here to my wonderful model and just showcase this new Lego edition of space debris. So that is a typical second stage, and I mean it's more than a bus size or a bus size object, I think. So can you talk about those a bit more?
Absolutely, yeah. So one of the things that's very interesting is back in the day, back in the 80s and the 90s, much of the Soviet Russian hardware that was launched, the rocket bodies were actually much larger than the payload that was being deployed. So you might have a 9,000 kilogram rocket body left at 850 kilometers to launch a 3,000 kilogram satellite. Now, the silly thing about this is they left the rocket body and the payload in almost identical orbits. So there you go. And so those things, unfortunately, are not quite to scale, since a 9,000 kilogram payload is like the big yellow school bus that your kids take when they go to school, except it has no driver, it has no brakes, it has no turn signal. It just keeps going.
Okay. So, and now traffic management comes in. What is traffic management about? And yeah, what is the idea behind? Is it just to put the rule system out? That's it?
Yes, that's a great question, Torsten. I'll tell you right now, some of the best minds around the world are trying to figure out the definition of space traffic management. And the more complete it is, the less likely we're going to get agreement. So I'm going to tell you my definition of space traffic management. Don't let operational satellites collide with anything that's going to terminate their mission. That's simple. Don't have collisions. Unfortunately, when you look at the actual backdrop of that, with these dead objects that have been up there, live objects that slough off debris. So unfortunately, people think space is really clean, but paint sloughs off the satellites and it comes down. We can't see it. As we often like to say, what you cannot see can kill you. Currently, when space traffic management, the classic collision avoidance maneuver, I'll say there's this conjunction coming. Let's do a maneuver. Great, I missed that piece of debris. Well, no, you actually missed 3% of the lethal debris. The other 97% you can't see yet. So space traffic management is about avoiding collisions, getting people to coordinate and collaborate in these collisions. Right now, it's not a concern, but in the future, one person's collision avoidance maneuver may put somebody else at risk. Just like it is on a busy highway, right? One person changing a lane is a ripple effect. Right now, we're pretty good, but we've got to start planning for that more complex environment that's going to be there in the very near future.
And can you differentiate for us a bit on space safety and space sustainability, how that go together? I mean, because at the moment we have in all the informed or uninformed discussions, we have to say fairly, are a mix of all these words in one, as long as they sound cool, they're used. So that's sometimes the feeling I have, even in the press we are reading here.
Right. So I think, unfortunately, the term space sustainability has come across as, well, that's got to be right, because that's a good word that everybody's using, and this is the right thing to do. What I really think about is I want to do the traceability. If I'm sustainable, am I also safe? And what I can tell you is there are many sustainability recommendations for space that do not actually support safety. So safety is the current, making sure that satellites can operate reliably during the mission lifetime. Sustainability is often looking generations out. And interestingly enough, depending how you craft that metric for sustainability, you actually might make things unsafe. So let me just drill down on that for a second, if you don't mind. Mm-hmm. There's currently what's called the 25-year rule for debris mitigation, that 25 years after a satellite's finished its mission, it should be removed from orbit. Unfortunately, 25 years is an awful long time. And so there's been a lot of debate about should it be 5 years or 1 year. And what people will do is say, well, let's look at the total population in low Earth orbit after 200 years, looking at models and say, I'm going to use the 25-year rule and the 5-year rule. And if you look at the 200 years, they'll say, there's only a 10% difference between those two. So why should I do the harder 5-year rule? Unfortunately, that apparent sustainability metric actually is not safe for orbits below about 800 kilometers, because what can happen below 800 kilometers, you can have major breakup events that will be cleansed in decades that won't accumulate over 200 years. So what you've kind of done is you sort of mortgaged that altitudes below 700, 800 kilometers and said, well, I don't care what happens there because it washes out in decades. Unfortunately, a decade is 2 or 3 satellite lifetimes for some of the new satellites that are being launched. And so that's the concern that I have, that if you're not careful how you define sustainability, you don't get safety. But if you're safe, you will get sustainability. That's my opinion, and I will tell you, it's a little controversial.
I heard about that. Let us try connecting the dots here and picking up on what you just said, improving sustainability in space. How can our space traffic management help to improve sustainability?
Yeah, so that's a great question, Torsten. I think really what we need to do is
just taking on that. I mean, the rules that we all have on the highway and we all have a driver license, most of us, I hope, we are still involved in accidents. And so can we compare it a bit in that direction? Or
I think the most important thing as we're looking about space safety or space traffic management leading to sustainability, really what's going to not be sustainable? What's not sustainable is we make debris so that other satellites cannot operate reliably, which means we're not being safe, which means we're not following good rules. I often like to use an analogy for kids. If you have kids and you put them out on a bike and it doesn't have a steering wheel, is that going to be very safe? Right? So we shouldn't be doing the same thing in space, letting satellites go up that don't have an ability to avoid a collision. That's not safe, and it's also not sustainable because it may result in some collisions that are going to occur in the future. So I think the point of view of space traffic management is if you don't add to the population through collisions, then that will help sustainability. But you also have to have space environment management. And space environment management is really about the stuff that's dead. You can't manage the traffic when it's dead. You can't say which way should it go. So we need to remove that, right? We need to remediate that, right? And so unfortunately, space traffic management gets much more complicated if you don't ask people to have a collision avoidance capability, but it gets more difficult if the dead stuff behind starts colliding. It's kind of like driving on the highway. Driving on the highway is very unsafe if there's lots of potholes and the bridges aren't very well maintained. It makes your traffic much more hazardous without that infrastructure. So that's what I'm very concerned about is we're focused on, and I like to say we're focused on things to the right of the decimal point, and we haven't agreed to the left of the decimal point yet, right, on the really big issues.
Do you have a feeling about the new satellites that got launched, which have what is the percentage of satellites that have a capacity or capability to maneuver in space? Is that something in your research you have analyzed?
Absolutely. So many of the CubeSats that are the smaller ones that are more academic oriented or research oriented, hardly any of those have any collision avoidance capability. There have been a few ones that have shown the capability. It's not hard to do. It's just, if it's not required, they're not going to add it. When you start looking at things like OneWeb and SpaceX Starlink, of course they do, because they have a constellation that they're going to manage, right? So normally what you're going to see is probably 80% by number will have collision avoidance capability, and the 20% that don't are kind of spread all around. The big actors are going to do it because they need that for their constellation to stay robust. But if you just have one satellite and you can satisfy these debris mitigation guidelines by not having it on there, that doesn't take away any of the mass they need for a payload, then they're not going to add it. And unfortunately, I think that's sort of being not being responsible for the long term, which to many people, that's about sustainability, being responsible for the long term.
And capacity to maneuver includes for you as well passive maneuvering, like putting your solar panels in the sun and yeah, I mean, sailing on the wind, I would say, or almost. Is that something that you include, or you say no?
Well,
that's not...
that's a great question. It really depends on the responsiveness and the quality of your data, right? Because what normally happens is we get the data from radars on the ground, like Leo Labs provides, and you have a certain amount of time to warn, and spacecraft operators will say, I need a certain amount of time to warn before I do make that maneuver. So the problem is when you do the drag augmentation for trying to get it in some passive way to do a maneuver, oftentimes that's much, much smaller. So you need to be warned much, much sooner. And with the limited number of radars on the ground, we don't have that ability. But that's one of the reasons why I went to work for Leo Labs, is because we're building that capability. We're building more radars, so there's less time between observations. So we actually might be able to warn a little bit later because we have better custody of the objects.
I will come to Leo Labs, and I'm promising that in a second. So just to wrap up on the space traffic management issue, I mean, that should be a global endeavor, obviously, because no state should do that, or no nation should do that on its own. So, but who should lead that? And what governance models would you propose for that? Is it lead by one strong nation, or
No, it absolutely has to be a global agreement, right? And there are several layers looking at this already. You have the long-term sustainability principles. Tomas, who's watching, can talk about that much better than I can, about what we're doing for the United Nations. Consensus-based, here are good things to do, but they're pretty high up, they're pretty general, right? We have ISO standards being developed. I don't know if Dan Altraghi joined us online, but Dan's been working that on the US side, but for the international group to come up with ISO standards to say what we should do when, what information we should provide, what information we should share, what are the formats so that this sharing gets done better. So there's also a number of organizations like International Academy of Astronautics, International Astronautical Federation, that have working groups to try to come up with these approaches, what we call track two diplomacy. If the engineers and scientists can all get together and get it and go, yeah, this is good, then we can hand it to the diplomats and they can make a policy. Unfortunately, it's not going as quickly as we would hope. Partly because nobody ever got an award for preventing a disaster that never occurred, so they don't want to be out front. But somebody needs to be out front to encourage that we are more responsible than maybe our models tell us we should be right now. Because if we aren't, we're going to end up being in a situation that's going to be hard to reverse it. This isn't like the Exxon Valdez. It's an oil spill, and we get all the oil together, and then we change the policy on the holes, like after Exxon Valdez with a when this happens in space, the horse is out of the barn, as we say in America, and it's hard to get the horse back in the barn. And so we have situations where we monitor and characterize these close approaches that we're having between 10 objects. And what we need to do is not ignore the close approaches, because they're usually harbingers for something that's going to happen in the future. So we're kind of at that interesting point. We haven't had any really, really bad collisions, but we're seeing close calls more and more. And that's usually an indicator that we need to do something more responsible than just waiting and hoping.
So for you, the Iridium or Cosmos thing wasn't a bad thing? Wasn't a bad
thing?
I think it was, yeah.
And there's a horrible thing. But was it
okay.
But was it enough? But was it enough to change the current policies about the 25-year rule requiring collision avoidance? No, everybody got to go on TV for a few weeks, and then everybody said, "Oh, it's too hard. It's going to be too expensive. It's going to restrict our space entrepreneurship." And then we've all gotten a little bit waiting for the next disaster to occur, is my concern.
Let's spend a few minutes on our friends from Astroscale and what is so unique about them. So, not why I'm cheering them today and wearing the T-shirt. No, but what is so unique? And I mean, this launch was yesterday or 2 days back, and yesterday. Or I got the press release from them so that everything is in operation. So maybe you, as an in-depth expert, can judge or value that a bit more for our audience.
Yeah. So the problem is, again, going back to the title, simple but not easy. Debris remediation is simple but not easy. Let's go grab the object and bring it down. Unfortunately, these objects that need to be removed, there's a paper I recently completed with 19 co-authors from around the world, and we identified the 50 worst objects to remove. Unfortunately, some of these are 9,000 kilogram rocket bodies tumbling with maybe fuel left on board. And you got to rendezvous with it. Then you've got to grapple it. You got to detumble it. And then you got to move it. Right, so there's several layers of engineering difficulty there that currently Astroscale are being visionaries about going out and methodically going through the technology demonstrations to be able to prove a real operational mission. They're not the only ones, but they're doing a great job. And so this current mission is really not removing any debris from orbit. Chris Blackerby said himself yesterday on the BBC World TV, he said, we're bringing our own debris with us. We're going to toss it up. We're going to grab it. We're going to toss it up, spin it up, and go grab it again. So they're practicing what they're going to have to do in real life. And so it's very, very valuable. But as I wrote in 2007, pay me now or pay me more later. If you don't get going on it now, it's going to end up costing more later, because if they're trying to do these missions through a more densely populated debris fields from other breakup events, that even the retrievals will get more difficult. So they're doing a great job of building the engineering foundation to start to operationalize debris removal.
Enough of cheering them. They're not sponsored us today for the show, so it was just a courtesy of the event that happened. So, but in your article that we had the pleasure or the honor to publish last month, you proposed a more precise measurements or precise measures. So to cover the entire sky or night sky, what would be the investment installation look like to measure it all?
Yeah, so obviously we measure, so all has to do with size and frequency. So let's be, and I know that this is the problem of inviting a senior technical fellow. I'm going to try to be technical here. We're not going to see all. We're going to see as much as we can. Right now in low Earth orbit, the current radars track and catalog objects that are 10 centimeters and larger. Unfortunately, objects as small as 5 millimeters can kill you. Right? It can terminate a mission. Objects that are above 2 centimeters will not only terminate the mission, and most likely will break the satellite up to some amount. Maybe completely, depending where you hit it, how you hit it, and where you are between 2 and 10 centimeters. Mm-hmm. So really what we're trying to do is first the things we see, we need to see often. We need to see often, because if we don't see them often enough, then we don't really know exactly where they're going to be 2 or 3 orbits later when we might be predicting this conjunction, or 2 or 3 days or 7 days later.
Mm-hmm.
So just like anything that you're going to be tracking, the more often you track it, the better you're going to be able to characterize at any point in time. And so first, we need to put more radars out there, and that's very expensive. It's very expensive to do. But luckily, Leo Labs has decided to invest to do this because it's the only way to really reduce the risk. In addition, the radars that we'll be deploying are S-band radars, which again, nice technical terms for you all today, is just allows us to see down to 2 centimeters. So we want to see everything more often and see more of the things that are lethal to satellites than just the 10 centimeters. And to do that, you got to be able to deploy them worldwide. Right now, but in the next 2 years, we'll have six radar sites, 4 of them being S-band radars with 2 S-band radars at each site, which allows us to almost get to the point of seeing every object, every orbit. Not quite, but we're getting there. So what that allows us to do, because right now you don't have that. And you also, radars being in Northern Hemisphere and Southern Hemisphere are very important, because when events occur in the Southern Hemisphere and all your observations are up here, you actually don't know what's going on down here very well. So it's really like watching your house. You don't have one detector for one window, right? You have detectors all around the house for different things, and that's what we need to do for low Earth orbit, especially with the number of satellites that are being deployed now. We've really got to increase that measurement operational tempo.
Or I just have one Rottweiler dog protecting the house. Just saying. As you joined, I mean, we talked about that. As you joined Leo Labs, tell us a bit more about Leo Labs. What's behind? What is your mission? I mean, you pointed into that direction. So and what do we measure? How precise that is at the end? How to use the data? Who's using the data? And so on and so on. I mean, give us this 3-minute pitch.
So Torsten, as being an ex-physics professor, I'm going to correct you. And we're not precise, we're accurate, right? Because you can be very precise and not be very accurate. So we are accurate and timely, right? So I'm sorry.
As English is not my first language, so I have to apologize for any
so we were
misplaced words.
That's okay. No, it's much better than my German, Torsten. Much better than my German. So I think the key thing is that there's a lot of very good work going on to enhance space traffic management from the data sharing perspective, from the rules of the road. All those things are very, very important. However, there's and a lot of the mathematics to do the propagation of the orbits. Those are all critical. We're very supportive of all those things. Unfortunately, the only way to really crack the nut, to really improve things by large factors, is to see more, to see the orbit more often. And the only way to do that is to put more sensors out there. Luckily, Leo Labs is really based out of developers of radars from SRI. And so this is the type of technology that is, state of the art. It's efficient, it's autonomous, it's a low maintenance, highly accurate, highly tunable. And so as a result, it's not, the 18th Space Control Squadron, United States government, doing a fantastic job, right? Then they're using radars mostly that were for ballistic missile early warning. Done an amazing job of taking that legacy hardware. What we've done is really skipped a couple of generations with the hardware. And we have a data platform that's actually tuned in scale to handle 250,000 objects in the catalog, because that's what we anticipate by the time we build out our S-band radar network around the world. There could well be 250,000 objects in our catalog. Right now in our catalog, in the 18th catalog, is around 16,000 objects, right? Well, 16,000 in low Earth orbit, right? We have that. But once we see down to those smaller sizes, it could very well balloon up to 250,000. So you have to plan ahead. And so we have a data platform and a processing platform that is ready to go to scale up to that. And that's just something that we're able to do because we're applying the most recent technologies and sort of the next gen. It's just like kind of looking at the new synthetic aperture radar satellites. You know, there are great SAR satellites from 10 years ago, and they're fantastic, right? They're 2,000 kilograms, you know, kind of churning up there like a big washer and dryer. And now you have, you know, ISI and Capella putting up these origami-like SAR satellites, and they're making constellations of them. So think of that same kind of technology advancement, but applying it to space situational awareness.
I think we will have another session on more of the details or on space tracking things, because I have a million of questions, but getting the warning already from our production team that we are almost at the end. I would like to take a few of the questions that we got from our wonderful audience. So Michael Maloney, thanks for this question. So when will the data from the Leo Labs radar in New Zealand become available? Will that be added to the official catalog? The question is, what official? I assume you mean the JSpot catalog.
Yeah, so our data will not be added to the JSpot catalog. We have a catalog and it's available to people, and we provide that data on subscription by subscription services. So if you're looking for our data going into JSpot and getting handed out for free, that won't happen. Unfortunately, we build the radars to provide the service, which includes conjunction assessments and deployment. And so it's available right now. We have a catalog. You can log on to Leo Labs data platform and see the number of how quickly we process, and the actual numbers are all right there.
I would like to encourage you to write another article for us to guide our audience into that, or if you don't mind, or
absolutely, yeah, no, I'd be happy.
Without making it a marketing piece, of course. Yeah.
No. You know me. It just makes sense to me. Like I said, I've been working in this field for 35 years, and I've been very risk averse, being a contractor. And I've been working with the Leo Labs guys for a few years, and I think they can make a difference. And so I want to be part of a group that can make a difference. So I think it speaks for itself. We don't, as I like to say, we should explain what we do and don't put adjectives. Let other people say if it's good or bad.
Valentin raised another question, which I think it's a quite interesting one. Do you expect the infection in Leo will spread out to higher orbits?
Yes, that's a really good question, Valentin. So there was a conjunction last year that struck my interest because it was an object that I actually identified as being one of the statistically most concerning objects in a transfer orbit. So there was an Indian rocket body that was in a transfer orbit from semi-sync up to like where GLONASS and all those are. So not all the way to GEO, but to high Earth orbit. And it was in transfer, so in perigee in Leo, and this apogee is in semi-sync. And we have some of those that are also in geosynchronous orbit, where the apogee is in GEO and the perigee is in Leo. And so what I'd like to say is, you know, we have a saying in America, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas. What happens in Leo may not stay in Leo, right? Because if you get an object in transfer orbit, and that event from last year, and it's in a couple of papers I've published recently, a 12% probability of collision between an Indian rocket body in a semi-sync transfer orbit and a derelict, an abandoned payload in low Earth orbit. So it's low probability, but it's high consequence because there is that corruption. So Valentin should give the next talk, because I think those are the counterintuitive. It's strange, but it actually is there, and we pay very close attention to those objects, because that would be a really catastrophic to have that bleed over.
Okay. I'm afraid we are running out of time here, but I will send this question over to you then, or Darren, to ask you for an answer. Maybe we take. Michael asked also, how can we motivate governments to fund our ADRs or active debris removal, or for the rest of us?
Yeah, that's a really tough question. Chris Kunstadter is a space insurance guy. we followed up our top 50 paper with a survey of all the companies that say that they can do ADR or they want to do active debris removal. We're trying to pull that together to then go and explain to some of the major spacefaring countries, this is what needs to happen. Somebody needs to put this forth. It's going to be really hard. I think, unfortunately, it may take a bad event to motivate people, but we're going to try and encourage people to do that sooner rather than later.
I'm attempting to give these other questions are also a chance from Tony Zefton, if that's pronounced correctly. Could you briefly discuss the trade-off between ground-based and space-based surveillance or radars?
Absolutely, yeah. So obviously, yes. So obviously, space-based, you're closer to the debris you're trying to see, right? But unfortunately, sometimes when you're space-based, you also can't change technologies quickly, right? And you become part of the problem. So you're right, because you're there and now you're part in the environment, right? And so I think there might be ways in which some of the space might provide some exquisite information that maybe from the ground would be harder to get. But so like most things, it's not this one or this one. It's a combination. But it's just so nice for us if we have something goes wrong with our radar, we do a little tweak and it's off. If it's up there, it makes it a little bit harder, right? And you are part of the problem, right? You got to be in the middle of it. So
that's right, yeah. But I think like you and Moriba are proposing, we need more sensors to measure it more.
Right.
I think that comes down, and wherever these sensors are. So now I'm afraid we have to close out or quite soon. By the way, we didn't get the right answer for what's in the background of Darren's picture. So much. I mean, Kevin also in New Zealand was not right. So
closer.
Darren?
It's Capri off the Amalfi Coast, right near Sorrento, Capri, in Italy.
Good. So, or for the Europeans, it's Capri. So.
Capri, sorry. Yes.
How the Germans would pronounce it. However, I'm afraid now we have to close it off here. But I'm sure we will continue this kind of talks on space security and threats or in future space cafes and in our magazine. We will start the Clubhouse launch in a few minutes or so, and I know that Yvette will welcome you there at 4:45 CET our time. So for our next weeks, we have the following lineup for you. In 2 days, we will host in the morning, and I know that's very bad for our friends in America. It's 9:30 CET. So even so, you guys move to summertime already. It's still middle of the night, but it's our second Space Café Law Breakfast with Stephen Freeland, Tanya Masson-Swan, and PJ Blunt. A super cool event. I mean, we have hundreds of registrations already, so that will be great to demystifying our space law on real examples. So on the same day, on Thursday, we have our first Space Café Young Global Talents by our editor-in-chief Markus Peyer, and he will host Michelle Hanlon to talk with students about why should they join space law and not do anything else. So especially for the students or people you would like to give some future or outlook or direction, send them over. My next talk will be next week, and then we are on summertime, so we are moving away from America again on the 6 hour to the East Coast our time. I will speak with Artie Holler-Maney from ESOR, and then a week later I have the enormous pleasure to talk with Alexandra Vallée of the ITU about all this cool stuff what ITU is doing. So what can that be? Yeah. On the 8th, we have our next Moriba's Vox Populi, number 4, with Moriba Jah, and his guest will be Kai-Uwe Schrogel and Dr. Laura Greco. So it's bad when you get a call at the same time here, then it distracts me from looking what's on the list here. And then on the 9th of April, we have we are part of the first conference on space outreach, Impulse 21. And I'm delighted to be the master of ceremony to guide you through this event. So all these events are online on Eventbrite already. As always, we would like to hear your feedback, so please check in with us on Twitter, on Facebook, on LinkedIn, send us an email. All that helps us. Don't forget to sign up for our daily or bi-weekly newsletters. And if you like to treat yourself with something special, become a Space Watcher today. Your support will help us, so take a credit card and visit our fan shop at shop.SpaceWatch.Global. I know, but we need your support to keep our work alive. Thank you all very much for your interest today, and thank you, Darren, for this inspiring and great talk, and of course, being my guest today.
My pleasure.
Thank you to the entire team behind the scenes for doing their great job again. Week by week. And Darren, I'm quite sure we will not speak the last time, so we will find other occasions to
maybe back.
I would say get it a bit more into the details. And yes, it might be a geek talk then at the end, but I think that's needed at the moment, that we point out to these things and not just talking on a PowerPoint level about the problems, because the problems are real. I hope you all will stay safe and healthy. Thanks for joining us. I hope to see you next week. In the meantime, visit our website, follow us on social media, and hope to hear you at Clubhouse in a moment. And don't forget, I would say point at that, become a space watcher, become a space sweeper, become a space watcher, whatever, as long as it has to do something with space. Thank you very much. Take good care. Darren, thank you. Bye-bye.